All right. All righty. Okay. All right. The date, October 31st. Happy Halloween, everybody. October 31st, 1926. The time, well, it was supposed to be played at the Polo Grounds, so usually around 2:30 in the afternoon, I'd say. The teams, the only time. This is one of those things that I love about back in the day. Happened back then, ain't never going to happen ever again. The teams, the Brooklyn Lions and the New York Giants. The place, well, as I said, it was supposed to be the Polo Grounds, but didn't happen. It was like a baseball game. It got rained out. Heavy rain. Obviously, we're going back 100 years in time. Things were so much different. There's no artificial turf. There's no dome stadiums. They don't reside the surface of the field like every commercial break, because if you got a little divot on the NFL, can't have a little divot or anything like that. We got to call timeout. Everybody going to come reside the surface so it looks absolutely perfect. Well, it wasn't like that back then. You know what I mean? It was a field. You played on. If you didn't like it, well, you go play someplace else. Then, it was what it was. And a lot of times, after the baseball season was over with, the football season rolls around. It gets all chewed up, and it is what it is. But I mean, especially back then, it was just dirt, right? I mean, it's not like the way it is nowadays. I've said this I don't know how many times, in the videos. Like nowadays, you can have a 300-foot wall, tsunami wall, come washing over a stadium. Right. And within like half an hour, the grass is bone dry because, I mean, they have it where, you can't have the field be wet. Don't want that. Right. Heaven forbid you played football in wet weather. Don't want that. So, I mean, so nowadays, everything's got to drain. Right. Don't want puddles. Heaven forbid you might get some mud, a little dirt on the jerseys. Don't want that. Well, things were a little bit different back in the day. There was no, it was dirt. There's no drainage system or this or that, what I mean? So when it rained, it puddled up and it just puddled up and it just sat, either evaporated or maybe after Lord knows how long, maybe it would seep into the, but it just, that's what happens. Sometimes things were just like quagmires, they were called. Some of these articles I'm reading, puddles and just so they just couldn't play. But it wasn't even this game. There was 3 games in the New York area that got rained out this particular day. Not all from the NFL. There were 2 leagues in 1926. For 1 year, there was the NFL and the original AFL. So if you think the AFL started in 1960. The original AFL started in 1926. It was a rival league that rivaled obviously the NFL. It lasted 1 season. I mean, back then it was very difficult just for the NFL to survive, and it survived, but more over the specific just teams. Didn't survive. Now, I can't remember. It's like the first 8 or 9 or 10 years or so, the Giants were in the league. If you ever look at it, from 1925 to 33, 34, somewhere around there, like every year there was a different amount of teams in the league. 1920, there was 1925, there was 20 teams. Then it went to 22. Then it dropped down to 12. I think it went to 11. It might have gone back up to 12, then back down to 10. It just, teams had a hard time surviving. There were some teams, obviously, like the Bears, thankfully the Giants, the Packers, the Cardinals, that succeeded. But there are many teams that just didn't make it. Some teams, like the Brooklyn Lions, lasted 1 season. They were in and they were out. What makes this game so interesting is this. The Giants would play the Brooklyn Lions two more times during the regular season. They played in Brooklyn, against Brooklyn, and then this game was postponed. It was played later on in the year. Let me see here. Let's pop this up here. Okay. All right. So this was obviously October 31st. This was Halloween. That got postponed due to the rain. So they had a game scheduled at Brooklyn on November 25th, which wound up being Thanksgiving. They played Brooklyn quite a few times, but it was more it was like, it wasn't the Brooklyn Lions. They started playing the Brooklyn team a lot on Thanksgiving. It was the Brooklyn Dodgers. But they made this game up. They played the Brooklyn on November 28th. So they did make this game up. It basically was about 4 weeks later. They played this game. All right. Now, as I said, there was 3 games in particular this day that did wind up getting canceled. But I'm saying the interesting thing is that the Giants played this Brooklyn team 2 times in November. But interestingly, when this game here got canceled, they were the Brooklyn Lions. When they played them again about a month later, they were known as the Brooklyn Horse Lions. What happened was the teams from the AFL started, going under. At the end of the season, I think there was 9 teams that started the AFL. At the end of the season, there was only 4 teams left in existence, right? 5 of them had started folding up because they just couldn't, the ticket sales just were not there. So they just could not afford to stay afloat. Now, the one problem is putting 2 teams in Brooklyn. It would have been hard enough for 1 team to survive in Brooklyn. They had 2 teams in Brooklyn. It was a team from the NFL, team from the AFL. They had 2 teams in New York. The New York Yankees from the AFL and the New York Giants from the NFL. It's just you're putting 2 teams in the same, and it made it very, even in New York, it was very, very difficult. Tim Mara, up until one of the last games of the season in 1925, they played a game. Red Grange came, and they had like 70,000 people there. And Tim Mara made some money because the place was packed. It was mobbed. But just before that, now remember, Tim Mara, the Giants, New York City, the media capital world, all of this stuff and everything, blah, 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 blah. He was, up until that game in 1925, he was about $40,000 in debt. So he was about $40,000 there. He lost money in 1926 as well, too. So for the fact that for them to put another team from the AFL in New York was just straight up crazy. That's why the league went under. Now, what happened was, in 1925, Red Grange, he was like, yeah. He was it. He was like Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky. Whatever. Barry said, he was like rolled all up into one. He was, for some reason, he was so iconic. He was just such a huge figure back then. He had such a wonderful career at Illinois. One of his biggest games was they beat the Michigan Wolverines in 1925. They beat them like 39-14, I think it was. Well, what was so just crazy about that game was that I forgot exactly the numbers. There's numbers in there, and you can look them up. Once again, I'm too stupid to remember. But it was like the prior 20-something games before that for Michigan, 20 or 30 games that Michigan played prior to that 39-14 loss that Michigan had. Michigan, as I said, the 20 to 30 games before that one game combined, Michigan gave up like 32 points. in 20 or 30 games combined. It was like 30, 32 points. So in the one game, Red Grange and Illinois, the Fighting Illini, right, scored more points in that one game than Michigan gave up in 20 or 30 games combined before that. And then even after that game, I think Michigan went on a little bit of a tear where they hardly gave up any points after that. Red Grange, he scored like 4 touchdowns against Pennsylvania. I mean, it was just people wanted to come out and see him. So, he wound up getting a manager, C&C Powell, or as he's known, Cash and Carry Pile. And he was all about the Benjamins. So he became his manager. So what he talked Red Grange didn't finish his senior season at Illinois. After the football season was over with, he left and he became a pro. He couldn't, obviously he's in college. He can't make money while he's in college. So he finished out his collegiate career, which was toward the end of November. And then he immediately became a pro. And everywhere he went, people, and he wound up signing with the Chicago Bears. But Cash and Carry Pile made a deal with George Halas, the guy who ran the Bears. He said, if you want, Red Grange, I think he made so much per game, but he also made a certain amount of the box office, like whatever it was. The first, I'm going to say, I can't remember exactly what it was. The first like 20,000 people, he would get like 50% of the ticket sales. The next 20,000 people that came in or whatever, he would get like whatever, 25% of the ticket sales. So he made certain amount of the ticket sales. So he was making like when he played the Giants at the Polo Grounds, I think it was December 6th, 1925. I think Red Grange made like $30,000 for one game. He's making $30,000 for a game. Meanwhile, his teammates are making about $100 a game. There was an exhibition game that they played out in Los Angeles. Was in the beginning of 1926. After the season was over, the Chicago Bears went on a barnstorming tour. And they went down to Florida. They went to like New Orleans. They went to California. They played 3 games out there. They went up they played in Oregon. They played in Washington. They played like 12. After the season was over, they went on a barnstorming tour. They went on a 12-game tour. Well, one of the games was out in Los Angeles. They sold out the Coliseum. He made like $50,000 for one game, Red Grange. I think he obviously splitting this money with C&C Cash and Carry Pile with his manager. But he's making $50,000 in a game. Meanwhile, the guys he's playing with are making $100,000. But don't get me wrong, back then, 100 years ago, you make $100 in one day, you're living good. But he made all kinds of money coming out because people wanted to see him play. One of the problems was, though, that they played so many games. Like they play a game, 2 days later playing another game, 2 days later playing another. They played so many games that he just got beat up and worn down. So some of the games he hardly played, or when he did play, he wasn't very effective because he was just beat up. Some of the games he was very, very effective, and people came out and he really showed off and everything like that. Well, after the season was over with, between what Red Grange made and Cash and Carry Pile, they made hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Cash and Carry Pile, Red Grange's manager, was obviously seeing dollar figures. He's like, I'm going to get, Red Grange. He's going to have his own team, right? And he's going to get so much of the box. People are going to want to come and see him. Right, so we'll get some players, but everybody's going to want to come see, Red Grange. So, he's going to get so much of the box office and all of that and everything. And so, Cash and Carry Pile, what he did was, pretty without asking permission or anything like that. What he did was he wanted to join the NFL, get his own team in there in the NFL. But he had his eye on the prize, so he went to New York. Without asking permission or anything like that. He went right to Yankee Stadium. He leased it out for 5 years. I think he had every Sunday or whatever it was from maybe September to, or it was maybe October to December, whatever it was. But for 5 years, he leased it out. I don't know why. I don't know if he had to sign a 5-year lease or what it was, but he signed a 5-year lease for Yankee Stadium. Then he went. Then the NFL had owners meetings, and he kind of went into the owners meeting. And he said, "Yeah, I just leased out Yankee Stadium for 5 years. Yeah, so I want a team in the NFL." Well, Tim Mara's like, the owner of the Giants is like, that you're impeding upon my territorial rights. Why don't you? He wanted him to go, to like the Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, which is a little farther away. So why don't you go to Brooklyn? Okay, go there. Right. That way we're farther apart. That way we can both maybe thrive and survive and both make some money. Well, Cash and Carey Powell didn't want none of that. He wanted Yankee Stadium or nothing. So because of the territorial rights, they didn't allow him in the league. Okay. So he's like, okay, well, you don't allow me in the league. All right, I'm just going to make my own league then. Well, they had money. He had money. So he could go out and get other players to come, and he made up other teams and all of that, and they created the AFL. It only lasted one season because he was too greedy. If he just went maybe someplace else, he could have made it with Red Grange. He maybe could have thrived and survived, but he got too freaking greedy. So he created his own league. The AFL had 9 teams in it. Let me see if I can pop these teams up here. The American Football League in 1926. All right, the 9 teams: the Boston Bulldogs, the Brooklyn Horsemen, the Chicago Bulls, the Cleveland. So, Chicago Bulls, you think Michael Jordan? Nah, Chicago Bulls, 1926, the AFL. The Cleveland Panthers, the Los Angeles Wildcats were basically a traveling team. The Newark Bears, Newark, Jersey. New Jersey, New York Yankees, Philadelphia Quakers, who actually wound up winning the league, right, in 1926. And interestingly enough, the Philadelphia Quakers of 1926, they actually had the Giants coach from 1925, Bob Folwell. He coached them. He left the Giants after 1925, and he coached the Philadelphia Quakers in 1926, and they wound up being the champions. And interestingly enough, after the season was over with, the Giants and the Quakers actually faced each other after the season was over in an exhibition game. The Giants wound up winning 31-0, but the Philadelphia Quakers, who won the AFL, they were with a record of 8-2-0. They were coached by the Bob Folwell, who coached the 1925 Giants. So interestingly enough. And then the Rock Island Independents, who were, interestingly enough, were a part of the NFL in 1925. It's just kind of crazy. But the thing is that there's two. They put 2 teams in Brooklyn: the Brooklyn Lions of the NFL and the Brooklyn Horsemen of the AFL. They did not play in the same stadium. The Brooklyn Lions of the NFL played at Ebbets Field. The Brooklyn Horsemen of the AFL played at Commercial Field. Both places were in Brooklyn, but let's see, Commercial Field is an athletic field located in the Wingate neighborhood section of Brooklyn. It was home to the Commercial High School soccer, football, and baseball teams from around 1906. Other schools, here. So you're going to click on it. There we go. Oh, here we go. So the Brooklyn Horsemen of the AFL played at Commercial Field. It's an athletic field located in the Wingate neighborhood of Brooklyn. It was home to the Commercial High School soccer, football, and baseball teams from around 1906. Other schools, such as Boys High and also called Commercial Field, their home from time to time, as did local teams in the American Soccer League in the 1930s. The field was also home field of the short-lived New York Brickley Giants in 1921 of the early NFL. It wasn't the NFL back then. It was the American Professional Football Association. So when the New York Brickley Giants played at Commercial Field in 1921, it was the APFA, American Professional Football Association. It was the APFA in 1920 and 1921. 1922, it became the NFL. And interestingly enough, the New York Brickley Giants, who were in the NFL in 1921, played 2 games, and that was it. They continued on as an independent team for a couple more years, I think until 1924, but they were part of the NFL in 1921. They only played 2 games in the NFL, and that was it for their existence in the NFL. In 1926, the Brooklyn Horsemen of the American Football League used the stadium as their home field. The lot was acquired by New York Parts Department in 1940, and the field survives today as a multi-sport facility called Hamilton Mets Field. Cool. So that's commercial field. So the Brooklyn Horsemen of the AFL played a commercial field. And can I get this here? Yes, I can. Ebbets Field. Here we go. Ebbets Field was a Major League Baseball stadium in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, New York. So both commercial and Ebbets Field were both in the Brooklyn section of New York. But, there was only so much money to go around. And to have 2 football teams in Brooklyn at the same time, it was suicide. And neither team made it through the end of the season. After the season was over, that was it. Neither team survived. So it was just crazy. Let's see. The Ebbets Field was mainly known for having been the home of the Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team from 1913 to 1957. It was also home to 5 professional football teams, including 3 NFL teams from 1921 to 1948. Ebbets Field was demolished in 1960 and replaced by Ebbets Field Apartments. Shocking. The site's current occupant. So the Brooklyn Lions played at Ebbets Field. But the thing was, is that, as I'm going to read here, is that, these teams just did not wind up surviving. It was just, I'll show you. So actually wound up being the 2 teams actually, they merged. The Brooklyn Horsemen folded. They merged with the Brooklyn Lions of the NFL. That's like the Detroit Lions, right? Playing most of their season, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, or whatever it is, Toronto Argonauts from the CFL fold, and they come down and they merge with the Detroit Lions for the last 3 or 4 games of the season. It's just crazy stuff. But stuff like that only happened back then. It's crazy. Okay, so we got the Brooklyn Lions here, right? So we got the Brooklyn Lions were a National Football League team that played in the 1926 NFL season. The team was formed as the league's counter move to the first American Football League, which enfranchised a team called the Brooklyn Horsemen, a professional football team that competed in the 1926 AFL season. In the months before the regular season began, both leagues battled with each other for fan support and the right to play at Ebbets Field. The NFL emerged as the winner as the Lions signed the lease to use the stadium on July 20th. So they got Ebbets Field, so they got the bigger stadium, the bigger, better stadium, new stadium, right? Because it came into in existence, in 1913, I think it was. So it was a relatively new stadium, nice and big. So they wound up winning. So they signed the lease on July 20th. On November 12th, 1926, the Horsemen withdrew from the AFL and merged with the Lions. The new team created by the merger was initially called the Brooklyn Lions for 1 game and competed in the NFL from November 22nd, 1926. They merged for 1 game and with the Brooklyn Lions. They beat the Canton Bulldogs 19-0, and then after that, they changed the name for the last 3 games of the 1926 season. The team used the Horseman name to finish the season. After 3 consecutive losses, all by shutout, the merger team went out of existence. All right, so we have the Brooklyn Lions. Right. They were coached by Punk Berryman. The Lions featured Rex Thomas and Hearn Bagby, 2 members of the backfield who could play either tailback or wingback. On defense, Thomas also snared 4 interceptions. Unfortunately, the team was only slightly more consistent in its play than the Horsemen. And after the November 7th game against the Kansas City Cowboys, a 10-9 loss at Ebbets Field, the Lions merged with the Horsemen. At the time of the merger, the Lions had compiled a 2-5 win-loss record. Let's see here. So they were 2-5. Then they, when they merged, they beat the Canton Bulldogs to become 3-5. Then they lost their final 3 games, which I'll go over in just a minute here, but all by shutout. So they finished the season in 14th place out of 22 teams with a record of 3-8. So the Brooklyn Horsemen of the AFL. The Horsemen of the first AFL were owned by boxing promoter Humbert Fugazy. I kid you not, Fugazy, Fugazy, and played their home games in Brooklyn's Commercial Field. Coached by Eddie McNeely, the Horsemen got the team name after McNeely signing of the Horsemen from 4 Horsemen from Notre Dame, right? They signed Elmer Layden and Harry Stuhldrager, 2 of Notre Dame's 4 Horsemen. With the team's first game was decided by a 60-yard touchdown pass from Stuhldrager to Eddie Harrison, the team had trouble maintaining a steady offense and ultimately maintaining a steady fan base. After losses to the Los Angeles Wildcats and Boston Bulldogs in front of decreasing crowds, a scheduled game at Ebbets Field against league leader and eventual champion, the Philadelphia Quakers, coached by Bob Folwell, who coached the 1925 New York Giants. It was canceled due to inclement weather on November 7th, 1926. The Horsemen played the last AFL game, a 21-13 loss to the New York Yankees, and then merged with their NFL cousins, the Brooklyn Lions, to complete the season in the NFL. So they started the season, the Brooklyn Horsemen started their season in the AFL, and by the time the season was over with, the football season was over with, they were in the NFL, merged with another team. It says the Horse Lions. Some people used to call them the Horse Lions too. The result of the merger was derisively dubbed the Horse Lions by the local media. But initially, November 14, 1926, the merged team played under the Brooklyn Lions banner for 1 game. The new team, with 8 members of the now defunct AFL team, trounced the Canton Bulldogs 19-0 in front of a small crowd at Ebbets Field. In a last-ditch effort to attract paying fans, the Lions then adopted the Horseman nickname of the old AFL team, and then they lost the last 3 games, all by shutout, and it was the last 3 games of their existence. So they tried to change the name up to get, because actually back then with Nuke Rockney and Notre Dame, they were huge as well. Babe Ruth, Red Grange, Notre Dame, just huge back then. So, I mean, to try to get the Horseman name, I guess that tried to maybe draw some more people in and everything. And it just didn't work out at all. Let's see here. So Brooklyn, let's see. So there we go. All right. So the Brooklyn Lions, okay. They started off, their first game they started off was on September 26th. They lost 13-0 to the Providence Steamroller. Then on October 10th, they beat the Hartford Blues 6-0. Then they would lose 2 games in a row. They lost to the Pottsville Maroons 21-0. And then they lost another game to the Pottsville Maroons 14-0. Let's see here. Then they beat the Columbus Tigers 20-12. So they were 2-3 at one point. Okay. Then they lost to the Hartford Blues 16-6, and then they lost 10-9 to the Kansas City Cowboys. So after that, they stood with a record of 2-5. Then they merged. The Brooklyn Lions merged with the Brooklyn Horsemen, and it became for 1 game the Brooklyn Lions, and they beat the Canton Bulldogs at Ebbets Field 19-0. So then their record went to 3-5. So they had 3 games left to go. So now if somehow they could beat these 3 teams, they would at least finish with a winning record. Maybe get the crowd coming back and all and everything. But the Los Angeles Buccaneers, actually, who were not a bad team that year. The Buccaneers, a road team, they finished with a record of 6-3-1. So they played them. They lost to them 20-0. Then they played to the Giants, who finished with a record of 8-4-1 in 1926. So the Giants were a good team, and they lost to them 17-0. Then they played another game. Then the makeup game, they played against the Giants at the Polo Grounds. So the first time they played the Giants was at Ebbets Field. And I'm going to have videos on all of this. I got articles about what happened during the game and all that. So I'm gonna have video coming up. Yeah, I'm going game by game here, but so the November 25th when they lost to the Giants 17-0, that was at Ebbets Field. Then and then 3 days later, that was on Thanksgiving. 3 days later, on Sunday, November 28th, they played the Giants at the Polo Grounds and they would lose 27-0. So I said, so I'm going to have videos on that. But after these 3 games, they lost all 3 games by shutouts. They was just no longer in existence. So. But then also the same thing. There was, sorry, buddy. Sorry, got my buddy here, Randy. But there was only 4 teams left in existence after the AFL was over. Because out of the 9 teams, 5 of them had folded up before the season even ended. So the Brooklyn Lions were a National Football League team that played in the 1926 season. The team was formed in the league's counter-move to the first American Football League, which enfranchised a team called the Brooklyn Horsemen, a professional football team that would compete in the 1926 AFL season. In the months before the regular season began, both teams, I went over this, they battled each other for fan support and the right to play at Ebbets Field. Said on November 12, 1926, the Brooklyn Horsemen withdrew from the AFL and merged with the Lions. The new team created the merger was initially called the Brooklyn Lions and competed in the NFL for 1 game. For the last 3 games, they used the Horseman name, and just to no avail. It just didn't work out. There was just it is what it is. I mean, the thing is that they never wind up looking at the cash and carry pile, the manager of the Red Grange, who wanted to create his own league and everything, like just didn't, all he saw was dollar signs and everything. And he thought because he had Red Grange, that would trump out anything that the NFL could wind up doing. And he just started putting teams, where they shouldn't have been. And, and unfortunately they wound up losing a lot of money. He made a lot of money in 1925. Well, 1926, he wound up losing a lot. So the Giants in 1926, this game here, the Giants were pretty much, I think they had 3 losses at this time. Yeah. The Giants at this particular point in time, they beat the Hartford Blues, and then they beat the Providence Steamrollers. So they started off 2-0. Then they lost 3 games in a row. They lost to the Chicago Bears, they lost to the Frankfurt Yellow, and then they lost to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets twice. So the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets were very good. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets in 1926 would become the NFL champions. So the Giants stood at a record of 2-3. Then they beat the Kansas City Cowboys, so they were 3-3. Then they lost to the Pottsville Maroons 3-0, but that was an exhibition game. So that didn't count in the standings for the Giants. So the Giants stood at 3-3. So here on October 31st, Halloween, they were supposed to play the Brooklyn Lions. They were the Brooklyn Lions at the time, not the Brooklyn Horsemen, or the Brooklyn Horse Lions, but the Brooklyn Lions. And it got postponed due to rain. I got a couple articles here. So, I mean, pretty much the Giants who were 3-3, back then, if you had 3 losses, I mean, chances are you winning any kind of a title was pretty much over. I said this before, a few of my videos. The 3 out of the first 4 overall, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23, 3 of the first 4 overall champions were undefeated. Now, they all had at least one tie. So there was no true, undefeated team like the 72 Dolphins, 17-0-0. But 3 out of the first 4 were undefeated. But I said they all had at least a tie or so. But I mean, so if you get 3 losses, chances of you winning the championship was pretty much null and void. That pretty much didn't happen. So by the time the Giants were coming around here to play the Brooklyn Lions, back then, I mean, obviously you wanted to win a championship, but also back then, guys played the games to make some money. They scheduled games to make some money. I mean, if at the end of the season, if you want to win the championship, cool, awesome, peachy keen. But the object was to schedule games so you can make some money. And let's see, so I got a couple articles here. This is it. All right, this is here. Now, this is a little article talking about the beginning of the game. The Lions clash with the Giants, and the Horsemen ride again. Another hard game is in prospect for Red Grange, New York Yankees of the AFL when they clash with Doug Wyckoff's Newark's aggregation at the Yankee Stadium this afternoon. This was an article that was written obviously before the day before the game, right? So they thought there was supposed to be a game at Yankee Stadium. There's also supposed to be a game played at the Polo Grounds. There was 3 games that got rained out. It says Wyckoff has collected an all-star band of former Southern Grid luminaries, and they have been playing an excellent brand of pro football since the season started. Red has had his team working hard all week in preparation for today's battle. The rain last week prevented Red's gritters from showing their real class, but with a break in the weather today, the Yankees are sure to make it quite interesting for Newark's representatives. Baker, Fry, and Hubert will play alongside of Red Grange. Incidentally, the Great Grange will engage in a duel with another Red Maurer, regarded as one of the greatest broken field runners in the South. Wyckoff, one of the best pro gritters in the business, Red Maurer, Williams, and Jacewick will make up the Newark backfield. As I said, that game, absolutely, like the Giant game, did not get played. Giants meet Giants. And interesting enough, 3 players from the Brooklyn Lions played on the 1925 Giants. It says here, 3 former Giants will be in the lineup for the Brooklyn Lions when they trek across the bridge today to engage in combat with the National Football League Huskies at the Polo Grounds. Paul Jaffe, formerly of Syracuse, Bill Rooney from the Colorado School of Mines, and Owen Reynolds of Georgia all wore the red and blue jerseys of the Polo Grounds 11 last year. Jaffe, who was the best known, yes he was, of the 3, was one of the bright spots during the first year of professional football in the city by his work at End. Rooney was able to get into only a few games last year because of injuries, but he exhibited plenty of stuff and has been going along at a great pace this season. Reynolds did not join the Giants until near the end of the schedule, and as a result is not so well known. He was sold to Brooklyn and has been doing brilliant work this year. Today's game will be for the benefit of the Allied Charities Fund of the BPOE, and a bumper crowd is expected. Well, that didn't happen. All right, so I got... So I got 2 articles here. This one's really, really short, but then there's another one just a little bit longer. And there was, I was reading some articles in the newspaper, and there were certainly some things that did happen because of the rain. There was one article, I remember there was somebody skidded on a wet road, and I think they drove into something. I forget, it was a pole or something, and they wound up dying. But there was many accidents, at least 3 that I can remember, were due to wet roads. So, it rained a lot. Not so much you're going to find out in this article, but there's another article. The last one I got it's a little longer. It's not too much. They didn't go too extensively into anything here. It says pro gritters go in and out of rain. All 3 professional football games scheduled in the metropolitan area yesterday were postponed because of the inclement weather. Red Grange's Yankees were to have met the Newark Bears at the Yankee Stadium. The Giants were to have played the Brooklyn Lions at the Polo Grounds, and the Horsemen were scheduled to play the Rock Island at Commercial Field. So the Yankees and the Polo Ground at the Yankee Stadium and the Polo Grounds, right, and Commercial Field in Brooklyn, 3 games. 1 in the NFL, 2 in the AFL, all got rained out because of this. All right, so I got one more here. It's a little bit longer here. It says heavy rains keep Pro 11s idle. But Grangers meet Rock Island tomorrow, and Giants will face Canton Bulldogs. So that means the The Giants faced the Canton Bulldogs on 2 days later, right? The Giants, let's see here. They were supposed to play this game on October 31st, and it got rained out. 2 days later, on November 2nd, they played the Canton Bulldogs at home, and they tied them 7-7. Right. All right. The rain, which fell in torrential downpours through the morning and afternoon yesterday, forced the cancellation of all 3 professional football games here, though the managers of the contending 11s did not give up hope that the games could be played until after the scheduled starting time. The Polo Grounds prepared to take care of a crowd of 25,000 Elks, including the Grand Exalted Ruler Charles H. Grocklow of Philadelphia, and Governor Al Smith and former Justice Robert F. Wagner, Democratic candidate for the United States Senator, was what they say here, was knee deep in water. Now, I'm not sure if that's true, but a lot of water. It was knee deep in water, and it was at 3 o'clock. The rain was coming down in a manner to discourage all except mariners and deep sea divers. Now, usually back in 1925, the games at the Polo Grounds started at 2:30. So for them to wait till about 3 o'clock, I mean, they waited and waited, and they waited another half an hour, and it was still coming down. And also, let's not forget, there was no lights, right? So they couldn't wait. Well, just wait till 6 o'clock at night. Well, yeah, they could wait till 6 o'clock at night, but then they wouldn't be able to see, right? So they figure, I mean, because you're figuring this was toward the end of October, so you figure, it was probably getting dark. I don't know if they had daylight savings or exactly what, but you figure it got dark maybe 6 o'clock at night or so. Somewhere around, it started getting a little too dark. So they couldn't wait till 4 or 5 o'clock, because by the time, if they waited till 5, okay, they might be able to play half a game before it got dark and they couldn't play anymore. So by 3 o'clock, that was like it, and it was still coming down, and the field was a quagmire and all that. So it was like, right. Crowds of Elks, because remember, this game was supposed to be a benefit game, right? Crowds of Elks were here for the event, but it was decided to put it off until a more suitable day, which wound up being about a month later on November 28th. So they postponed this game till a month later, 4 weeks later, November 28th. The Giants would wind up winning 27-0 in what would wind up being the final game in the Brooklyn Lions in the existence of their team. The Brooklyn Lions, Brooklyn Horsemen, whatever you want to call them. It was the final game in their existence. Let's see. Tickets for yesterday's game between Tim Mara's Giants and Eddie Butler's Lions will be honored at Sunday's game between the Chicago Cardinals and the Giants. Now, the Giants would wind up playing a week later. So the Giants played, actually, if you look at it, the Giants played October 29th. They were supposed to play October 31st. They were supposed to play November 2nd and November 7th. So So in 10 days, they were scheduled to play 4 games in 10 days. And you guys get pissed off nowadays that they have to play Sunday and Thursday. Yeah. Two games in 5 days, actually. Sunday, 2 games in 5. Well, they played 4 games in 10 days. And when they were on the field, the guys played 60 minutes. I mean, there was some substitution. Not everybody played, but most of the guys played like 60 minutes. If you came off the field, that's because you were dead, right? If you were alive and breathing, you played 60 minutes. And these guys played 60 minutes, 4 games in a 10-day span, and for about maybe $100 a game, right? And guys nowadays complain, I'm only making $30 million a year. What am I supposed to do with that? Cut me a break. Let's see here. Red Grange was scheduled to start against Doug Wyckoff and his Newark Bears, but as Big Bill Edwards, president of the American League, had failed to equip the rival squads with slickers and knee boots, this game also was called off. Tickets will be honored at some future date. Humbert Fugacy's Horsemen, fearing the treacherous footing of Commercial Field, Brooklyn decided to call off their contest with the Rock Island Independents. The pro football teams, however, will be in action tomorrow, Election Day, which is the day that the Giants wind up playing the Canton Bulldogs. Now, the Giants actually played on election day the year before as well, too. I'm not sure what it is playing football on election day. I'm not exactly sure what that. I don't know. I don't know why they're married, but let's see. Election day here. The Giants played the Buffalo Bisons on November 3rd, 1925, election day. November 3rd, they played the Buffalo Bisons at home, and they beat them 7-0. So here it is, election day, 1926, which would be a November 2nd, and the Giants beat the Canton Bulldogs at home. So I said, I'm not sure what it is about playing football and why they have to play football on election day. Why do they have to play football on a Tuesday when they just played football on a Sunday? I don't know what that is, but it is what it is. Let's see here. The Grangers will face the Rock Island Independents in a professional football game at Yankee Stadium tomorrow on election day, where the High School of Commerce and Morris High School 11s meet in a preliminary game to start at 1:15 o'clock. The Giants will engage the Canton Bulldogs with Jim Thorpe and a group of nationally known stars at the Polo Grounds. Now, let's not forget, Jim Thorpe played his first 3 games of 1925 with the New York Giants. He got injured. The first game ever played at the Polo Grounds for the New York Giants against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. He got injured. They let him go. He never played another game for the New York Giants. Let's see here. So the Giants will engage the Canton Bulldogs with Jim Thorpe and a group of nationally known stars at the Polo Grounds. Following the game between DeWitt Clinton and Stuyvesant, I guess 2 schools, I guess. And that game's supposed to start at 1:15. So 1:15 o'clock, it said. So that's, as I said, so this game would wind up getting, scheduled to made up a month later. But I said, only things like this could happen back then. They were playing the Brooklyn Lions of the NFL. Meanwhile, the Brooklyn Horsemen of the AFL, they're only able to survive so many games. Let me see here. I went over there, right? What their games were. Nope. I got him here. Okay, yeah, I went over their games. Yeah. Okay, we got a Brooklyn Horseman. Yeah, I mean, they finished with that. They only played 4 games. Yeah, they played 4 games in the. I had their, but they finished with a record of 1-3. So they the Brooklyn Lions were bad, but the Brooklyn Horsemen were even worse of the AFL. They finished 1-3. They only played 4 games, and they couldn't survive anymore. So they went out of business. And I said, so then they wound up merging with the Brooklyn Lions, and they wound up becoming the Brooklyn Horsemen. So, and I said, so this game was played on October 31st. It was supposed to be played. It got postponed due to what they said in some of the articles, knee-deep worth of rain. As I said, because there was no drainage back then. If it was a pond, it was going to be a pond for quite some time. So they got canceled or postponed and got played a month later, a game which the Giants would wind up winning. So that's pretty much what happened on this date, October 31st, 1926, in New York football Giants history. See you next time.